This is a story of how a single low-budget movie managed to cause a sexual revolution, how it created a multi-billion-dollar franchise with more sequels than any other movie, and how it transformed an unknown 21-year-old girl into a global sex icon. Emmanuelle premiered in the summer of 1974 in Paris and was an instant success. Although it was a simple story of a woman's discovery of her own sexuality, it changed the sexual attitudes of millions of people. For others, it was pure poison.
I think Emmanuelle was a bad thing for women.
It was a fantasy of dysfunctional men. It will always be a fantasy of dysfunctional men.
For its star, it was a journey that would culminate in her downfall.
I knew that if I didn't get her back to Europe, she would die. She would absolutely die.
An estimated 300 million people have seen Emmanuelle around the world. By the late 1970s, Emmanuelle had become a global brand, competing with Coca-Cola. Today, the brand has generated over 80 sequels and turned over an estimated $5 billion. Why was the movie so successful? The critics said it didn't even have a storyline. One critic even compared the film to a long, dreamy advertisement for menthol vaginal deodorants. But still, people talked about the film more than about the Vietnam War, the Cold War, Yom Kippur War, all put together. To understand the phenomenon, we tried to go back in time, to the original inspiration, to what the early 70s were really about.
A lot of things came together in the 70s.
Polly Toynbee was a figurehead for the feminist movement and sat on the British government's censorship committee when Emmanuelle was released.
First of all, you had a whole young generation that had got money to be free, to buy motorbikes, to go to other places, to be free of their parents' houses. And with freedom came inevitably a measure of sexual liberation.
It was okay to have sex without marriage. You had birth control, you did not have disease.
There was a very important element was that all of a sudden the pill appeared.
There's no doubt that was a huge breakthrough. For a brief time, it looked as if you could have pleasure without responsibility, sex without consequences.
They felt in power. They are like men.
We want our own revolution. It's not the men's revolution, it's a women's revolution, and it's about us, ourselves, our bodies, our children, our sex lives.
Open Marriage came out by the O'Neills, a major book telling everybody that they could engage in multiple partners. They should engage. We had swinging and wife swapping that hit.
Sex began to be sung about more explicitly, talked about, thought about. Sex. Sexualization of absolutely everything.
Sex was everywhere, but rarely on the movie screen, unless that movie happened to be X-rated and the theater in a back alley. Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris broke the rule.
There was a very strong potential in these type of movies because we had the example with Last Tango in Paris. We decided up front, we can't get Bertolucci, so we have to have an intellectual alibi. That's why the idea of a book.
The novel, Emmanuelle, was published and distributed clandestinely in France in 1957. The story is supposedly an autobiography of the author, Emmanuelle Arsan, a French woman of Thai origin. In the book, she explores her sexuality with multiple partners, has sex with her husband's male and female friends, and is guided through random sexual errands by her mentor. But despite all of this, she stays loyal to her consenting husband. In this way, the book establishes the prototype of the so-called liberated woman.
I read Emmanuelle and said, my goodness, what can I do? What can I do with a book like that?
And he phoned me in the night. He said, if it's impossible, I can't do it.
So we decided to do something soft and beautiful with a nice story, with a very famous book.
And after that, we decided to find the actress.
But finding the right actress turned out to be much more challenging.
For the character Emmanuelle, you need absolutely a beautiful woman, but she has to be also very pure. And these are very, very rare qualities.
So just organize a few castings in Rome, in Paris.
The casting process was some nightmare, which kind of film we won't do. Eroticism? No way. Eroticism was something forbidden.
Impossible to find somebody.
And she has to look very distinguished because she will be doing a lot of sexual things in a film.
The idea was to find something pure, not vulgar.
Never, never should she look like a whore, because she's not a whore. She's a liberated woman.
The filmmakers realized they were not looking for an actress. They were looking for an actual living replica of the liberated woman. What they didn't know was that actually finding her would upset the balance of feminism. The search for the liberated woman to star in the first ever soft erotic movie, Emmanuelle, was on. But did she even exist?
The casting was going on for a number of months, and no Emmanuelle in sight. So one day we'll put one tape on. The guy who was operating the machine rewinded, and at the beginning of the tape there was a little skinny girl with short hair. Jean-Louis, all of a sudden, as he had written the script, he said, "Stop, stop. This is Emmanuelle, come back." She was beautiful. She was sensuous at the same time as a little bit distant. She had all the qualities that were required. So we called Amsterdam, and they didn't know who that girl was. It was like a real search because they had to find her.
She was a complete stranger, unglamorous, a convent-educated, 21-year-old Dutch girl. But she had elegance, purity, innocence. In 1972, she was still a secretary, but she longed to be something more.
I met with Just, and there was a camera. And since she told me there was nudity involved, I had dress with spaghetti tires, or how do you call it? And there's one movement, I think I didn't even have to touch it. I could do it over the shoulder. Whop, the entire dress fell to the waist. And I just went on talking, like where I lived and the hobbies and why I could do this film and da-da-da. And Just said, I want to do some nude photography with you. I said, that's fine. And it was fun. So he could see that I would have no problems with nudity.
I don't know. I knew that was a girl.
She was the perfect woman. She was the perfect Emmanuelle. And we knew that we were now going to be able to shoot the picture.
All at a sudden, I was given, the green light. I signed a contract. And then we were off. Hugo and I flew to Paris, and then from Paris to Frankfurt. And then off to Thailand.
She went to do it as a lark because she wanted to see Bangkok. And she thought this would be a good way to see it. Nobody involved with that movie knew what they had. It was really lightning in a bottle.
The crew were finally ready to shoot, but shooting an erotic movie in 1970s Thailand was no picnic, especially when the director didn't even have a script.
The production, of course, was not very easy because it's not very easy to shoot in Thailand. It was the first time Just Jacquin was directing a feature-length film.
I never did a feature film. Yves Rousseau never did. Sylvia was his first film. We just go there with a book we had to write.
And normally the script is the Bible, you know, for a director, but just, no, he preferred to work in a very, relaxed circumstances and with ideas that came up, you know, on the spot.
You have an idea, okay, do it. We did the decoration ourselves, we do the light ourselves, we do everything ourselves.
Instead of hiring a typical filmmaker, they hired Just Jacquin, who came out of this exquisite fashion photography, soft lenses. He knew how to shoot her.
I liked the scenes with Marika Green, and we had a good time off the set also. She was a bit standoffish in the beginning, but later there's this nice moment when they go with this horse in the field, and there's the scene with a little hat, or this cap, where it is playful and tender. That is what I like best. It is also, it shows really the purity, the innocence of the girl.
The filmmakers wanted to push the envelope of what was allowed on screen. Certain scenes were custom manufactured as marketing devices to generate gossip and even shock, such as the rape scene.
The rape scene was very easy to understand. Why it was difficult? Because
yes, because I couldn't see how a rape could be pleasurable.
it's terrifying. You jump from a story, you jump from an acting scene to something real in one end.
These two Thai people were not actors. I really had to fight for my life there. They were rough. It seems that they enjoyed also what they were doing. And I kept my underwear on because I knew otherwise things go absolutely berserk.
And those guys tried to touch her with it. I think it was surely a very tough thing to do. But she did it.
I really had no choice. But thank God he's a director who uses like more than one camera, so you don't have to do the scene like 16 times in different positions. I mean, I came out of that scene black and blue. Yeah.
The infamous lesbian love scene was also manufactured to generate gossip.
Oh, French magazines.
The masturbation scene is with Christine Boisson. When I read it in the script, I said, like, oh, God. I said to Just, how are you going to film this? It was a very good idea. He found this magazine with Paul Newman on the spread, and he laid it down on the knee of Christine Boisson. She took the lead, and then I followed, and then we kind of dreamt away, and then we got banned. The camera went to the clouds, I think. And I remember, by now they had a translator when it wasn't necessary, you know. And I asked this man, do you have a smoke? And he came back with something that looked like a cigarette, but I thought, well, maybe it's a hand-rolled thing. And he took a couple of puffs, and I was, ugh. It's the first time that I had a joint, apparently, and I didn't know what was happening. And I said to Just, I see you double, and I had laugh kicks, and I said, oh my God, who gave her this shit? And then, well, we couldn't work for the rest of the day.
Things were not very, very easy. And after a while, we were discovered as making this film, and it became even more difficult.
The crew had no license to shoot in Thailand, something that would eventually prove to be problematic.
Everything went all right until Marika Green and I stood naked under a waterfall.
And we shot just under a monastery.
And this was seen by some monk. He said it was a holy waterfall.
The guy arrived, takes the tail on it and say, that's my land, that's my land. Don't forget we arrived in Thailand without any permission.
And then we got arrested, all of us in a police boat.
The cameraman took out the magazine, put a new one. He said, cannot prove anything.
He had a phony script with him, that had nothing to do with Emmanuel or...
We said to them that we came here to do a documentary of flowers.
But unfortunately, he didn't remember the title of the fake script. He didn't remember anything, so I said, like, why don't I just ask them how much they want, how much money? He said, if you don't shut up, you'll be in jail for even longer. I said, okay, okay.
I start to be crazy and everything like that. I can be in jail for a long time.
But luckily enough, the Yves Rousserrois was acquainted with
The cousin of the king. And when I met him, he said, I want to help you to be involved with your production. I took the next flight to Bangkok to see again the Prince Planu. He said, well, no problem, come back with all your team. And
this man had studios in Bangkok, so we could proceed with the film in the studios.
And we send rushes to Paris, and they never come back.
By the time the crew were shipped back to France, the movie was far from finished.
So, of course, when we came back to Paris, almost kicked out of Thailand, we were missing quite a few sequences.
I think that the film really existed, started to take shape in the cutting room.
We really put into the film all the sequences, like, for instance, the sequence of the little Thai girl who smokes with her pussy.
This controversial sequence caused conflict between the director and the producer. It later became the most talked about scene in the film.
It was an idea of Yves Rousserrois, by the way, to put that in the picture.
Yves, in one hand, want more to do with pornographic films that I did.
I was really disappointed when I saw the editing, the first editing of the picture.
If Sylvia was involved with that scene, if the guy or the husband, everything was involved with that scene, perhaps I was against, I refused to shoot it. He shot it himself.
So I help just for editing, you know, I get something.
This was something like the butter sequence in Last Tango in Paris. It was a boring picture because it was a film where people came just to see that sequence. And once the butter sequence was over, you could hear the seats go pop, 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 up.
And a lot of friends told me long years after, I love your film, but why did you put that fucking scene?
You need to have a table conversation about a picture to make it a huge success.
I said, I don't do it, but I cannot go out of the theater and say, that's not me, I put that scene in the film, that's Yves.
I wanted to be more ambitious.
Pop, 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 up.
The movie was finally patched together in the editing room, but the filmmaker still faced a major hurdle before getting it released.
I didn't expect it to be such a huge success. Really. Hugo even said, like, oh, this film is never going to reach the theaters because it will be barred from the censorship. And of course, in France, they had trouble with the censorship.
There were rumors that the film would be, might be banned.
Pompidou was very sick at that time, so nobody wanted to take the responsibility.
Emmanuel, ce film qui a été réalisé par Jules Jacquin, un photographe de mode très connu et plein de talent. Ce film donc n'est pas encore sorti faute de visa. Pourquoi?
In those days, the political situation of movies is that you can't show anything.
Et je comprends vraiment pas pourquoi c'est censuré. C'est peut-être parce que le livre a été interdit.
And de Gaulle was the president of France. His wife, Yvonne, was very religious.
I sent a telegram to the minister. I say, well, we want to release in June. And, you know, everybody was hesitating, you know, because
it was really going one step further than all the films.
Well, it was a time when there was a lot of really wild stuff going on anyway. but on the artistic fringes. So we used to go to a lot of extraordinary things at the Institute for Contemporary Art, shows with people with no clothes on, exotic poetry events all done in the nude, lots of very sexy stuff around. To be in favour of freedom doesn't mean you have to approve of everything within it. It doesn't mean you want to censor everything you don't like. That's what tolerance is about.
Upwards of 25,000 people demonstrated with songs and prayers for love, purity and family life, and the crowd heard a call for the reform of censorship laws.
It was much wilder stuff than Emmanuel, but because it was kind of mainstream, people felt it was breaking new boundaries.
Of course, the film finally got through censorship.
I guess he had to wait until there was a change of government.
On April 2nd, 1974, Pompidou died, and people lined up to pay their respects. 3 months later, a similar queue formed in front of the Triumph Cinema.
I peeped my head through at the corner of the Champs-Élysées, and all of a sudden, I saw there is a crowd.
It was a huge queue in front of the theater, but a huge one.
So I ran to the lobby of the theater, and I said to the cashier, "What's going on?" And she said, "Oh, everything is fine. We're almost full." So I ran back to the restaurant, and I knew that we had a success on our hands. More than 3 million admission in Paris. This is the biggest grossing for any film in any city in the world.
I was already amazed that the film came out in the theaters, so I was like on top of a tidal wave. I think it even beat West Side Story.
Emmanuel stirred up the movie industry big time. It was made for $1.75, it grossed a fortune, and it made Sylvia a star.
The second week was higher than the first week. The third week was higher than the second week. The fourth week was higher than the third week. This is absolutely exceptional.
They say the biggest problem was getting the money to the bank every day.
I guess that's a chance to be there at the right time, right place. And and the rest is history.
Sylvia was on her way to becoming one of the most famous sex symbols of the 20th century. But at what price? After wrapping the shoot in Thailand and beating the censorship laws to get the film released, it was time for the cast and crew to face the biggest challenge of all, fame.
I made twice world tour, and in every country the picture was successful. In Venezuela, in South of America, everywhere, you know.
Can you believe that the film stays 13 years in the movie theater? It was unbelievable.
There was all of a sudden another miracle. Women who were coming back because it was school time, they had read on the beaches articles about this film. So they said to their husbands, "Have you heard of this film, Emmanuel?" The husband, of course, would say no, because he didn't want to admit that he went already to see it with his secretary. The film, instead of dropping in September, all of a sudden picked up. We knew that we were assisting to a new phenomenon. Spain, for instance, the film was forbidden, and the Spanish were crossing the border. So Perpignan, a town that has maybe 70,000 people living there, and we were grossing 140,000 admission in Perpignan because it was close to the Spanish border.
As Sylvia's fame was skyrocketing, she figured she needed an agent. Jacques Guitart was a press agent for the film, so why not her personal agent as well?
Would you like to be my agent? She asked me. I said, but Sylvia, I am not an agent. I don't know the work of an agent. She said, well, you are not an agent, but I am not an actress. So we can work together.
Jacques Guitart took Sylvia around the world in 7 days, starting with Japan, where she was accompanied by actor Ian McShane.
The weird thing is I got a lot of letters from Japanese girls, and particularly girls like 16, 17 years old.
We arrived in Tokyo, The crowd was unbelievable.
There was these young girls screaming their heads off.
Sylvia, Sylvia, we love you, we love you.
The popularity was so immense that we needed the army for protection. We were jet-lagged, and I don't know, I didn't realize that same day I had to appear in a live show on Japanese television. So McShane and I, we had a couple of Mai Tais in the bar. We dropped in a coma or so, because I woke up, I put on the television, who do I see? Jacques Ita apologizing that I was not there. He said, I could not wake you up, you were both naked and dead on the floor. So, I mean, I got almost lynched by the Japanese.
The press in Japan painted Emmanuelle as a symbol of liberation.
There was this female journalist, and she said, when Emmanuelle goes on top of her husband, all the girls and all the women in the theater stood up and applauded and screamed, because it was the start of feminism and it was the end of the overpowering attitude of the men. I had the trouble to understand that, but it was symbolic for them. It was cute and it was welcome. A welcome comment after the attacks I got from feminists in Holland or France.
Tout se passe comme si les femmes ne méritaient rien d'autre que d'être constamment représentées dans le spectacle de la rue comme de purs objets de consommation.
The press in Europe were coming down hard on Emmanuelle.
I think she had her problems in Europe, particularly the British press. They are extremely cruel when they sense that you're defenseless.
The journalists were aggressive. They were saying, like, you've been doing a porno film, this and that. And for me, it was tough.
I saw some of the interviews. They were cruel.
Est-ce qu'à votre avis, c'est un film choquant?
Pas du tout.
She was sitting there, victimized, and nobody was keeping the damage control down to a minimum.
Some critics also said, like, the story, it's too thin and it's a poor excuse for what is pure exploitation. Particularly some demeaning scenes, like the rape scene, and then the scene after the boxing match, and then a weird scene like this, what I call the sandwich scene at the end with Mario.
The heat was also coming down on the director.
It was a really nightmare for me after. You put dirt on French movies. And all the Vogue, Elle, and magazines stopped to work with me like a photographer. Well, I have a big show for my sculptor at that time. Nobody buy anymore. For 3 years, it was put down because the success was so big and boom like that. I was le diable.
I had very mixed feelings about it. On one level, delightful erotic fantasy. Emmanuelle certainly seemed glamorous in all kinds of ways. It was a glamorous fantasy world. It wasn't about real life in any way that anybody could see it, and I'm sure travel in Thailand seemed extraordinarily exotic.
And I'm sure that if Emmanuelle was shot in front in Paris, a lot of people would say, it's disgusting. Do you have some people live like that in Paris?
I mean, I can hardly believe there's couples that say after having watched the show, so let's now call the neighbors and do some, some experiment. No, I don't think so.
And on the other hand, a number of us had ambivalent feelings about Emmanuelle as being on the border of this, of indeed opening the gateway to sexploitation on a gigantic scale.
Emmanuelle has nothing to do with a pornographic movie, you know?
Pornography is to fuck. You open the door, you fuck, open the door, you fuck anybody, everywhere, dog, animals. That's pornography. When you have love somewhere, it's eroticism.
The media was blurring the line between the actress and her role. Increasingly, Sylvia was being perceived as the iconic liberated woman.
The men thought of her as Emmanuelle. She was not. She was not the kind of a woman that say, boy, did I have a great fuck last night. She wasn't like that.
That is what I had to explain to journalists also. It's like, John Wayne doesn't shoot people in the weekend, in his day, in his time off. So it is really unnecessary to even compare me with the part I played. And I made it mine as much as I could, but it remains a role.
But if Sylvia Kristel wasn't the liberated woman, then who was?
I think the image of the liberated Emmanuel is the man's idea of what he would like a liberated woman to be, and it's rather nice, really.
She does what she wants.
Women were endlessly available.
When she wants.
On men's terms.
With who she wants.
They looked the way men wanted them to look.
She chooses.
They did the things men wanted them to do.
She's in control.
With the fantasy that they were doing it themselves of their own free will.
Emmanuel was a fantasy of dysfunctional men.
These kind of people have not seen the picture.
So many women have gone into the idea of being liberated and ended up being enslaved.
Because it is not a picture against women.
They're not only not married, but they're darning the guy's socks, they're engaging in sexual gymnastics that humiliate them, and then...
At the contrary, a picture for women.
Oh, but everybody can bullshit themselves, you know. Tony Blair can bullshit himself into a war. I mean, anybody can persuade themselves of anything that's convenient, and if it's commercially convenient to think, I'm making this wonderful movie to help set women free, you can persuade yourself, but it's still a piece of pornography.
The liberated woman is a male concoction. It was concocted out of the brains of men who did not love women.
Listen, that's a book wrote by women. So if they don't listen...
Well, at the time, I read the book of Emmanuel Arsan, and immediately it came to mind that this is not a book of a woman, it must have been written by a man.
Wait, what did she say again?
Written by a man, written by a man, written by a man, written by a man. And as it turns out, it was written by her husband. That is public secret.
The truth about whether Emmanuel Arsan or her husband wrote the book remains a mystery. But did it really matter? The concept of the liberated woman was now a cultural imprint, and the sequel, Emmanuel 2, was about to add to the legacy. In Emmanuel 2, Sylvia Kristel took her role a step further, much to the concern of her agent.
I went to see the Russians. I was not on the shooting. And when I saw the Russian, I was shocked. The sequence where she's masturbating. It was almost pornographic for me, you know, And we said to Sylvia, please, you are not Emmanuel. Well, are you accepted to do this? You should have refused to do that, you know? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I did not realize.
The second one was banned because all of a sudden there was a new law about pornographic films, and in order to create an example, the French government banned that film as if it was a pornographic film.
But Yves Rousseau, the producer, he said...
Si je ne sortirai pas le film en France, c'est-à-dire que ce film sortira dans tous les pays du monde.
And second, I sue the government. I won 2 years after. But in the meantime...
It came out in Spain, I believe because Franco died, and there was also a new government.
And the French crossed the border.
From Perpignan to go over the frontier and see Emmanuel in Spain.
In some countries, the release of Emmanuel became the testimony of the democracy, of liberty of communication.
Eager to step up a gear, Sylvia began receiving offers from Hollywood.
I didn't pay my taxes in France, and after you've conquered Europe, you know, you want to conquer Hollywood, although that is not as easy as it sounds.
She was having an affair with Ian McShane, who was a client of ours. And Ian was married, so all of this had to stay very hush-hush at the time. And he was working in Hawaii, and Sylvia was coming over to join him. We bonded immediately. I became immediately her Yiddish mama. There was no question about it.
But Los Angeles wasn't as pretty as it looked.
Because Los Angeles is not a metropolis. The days are long and boring. It's a factory town.
Because I was very lonely in Los Angeles, and I didn't have anything to do. I felt absolutely useless.
You know, she was always a duck out of water. She was not one of those hungry, ambitious actresses that would, you know, kill to get. No, that was not Sylvia.
Because, for instance, I refused to do auditions. I said, like, well, in Europe, I don't.
It's like putting a shy introvert into a world where they have to be, ta-da, I'm out there. It can be done, but at a price.
Also, these people, at the time I arrived, were so obsessed with cocaine and freebasing. I was caught up with that for a while.
The cocaine was her stimulation. I think without her drinking and drugging at that time, she would never get out of bed.
When you came to negotiate something or for some event, first thing people will do is like make a line. At a certain point, even the doctor who is going to check me for insurance for the film.
And the cost of it. Her business manager said, Sylvia, a lot of my clients coke, but none of them spend what you spend.
Take a tip above your head. You do that so well.
She, you know, could hardly remember what she did the night before, but she knew it wasn't good.
Because it was still highly socially accepted. They spoke about it like it was a recreational drug.
You would have thought that after private lessons, which was a humongous success, the phones would be ringing off the hooks for her.
And it's a shame that I thought for once, now I got a percentage, you know. And then the producer calls me like 3 weeks before the film opens. He says, do you want to sell your points for $150,000? I said, yeah, sure, you know. And that was dumb. But, yeah. But he was very happy, so if he leads people around in his mansion, he says, Sylvia Christel made this possible. Yeah.
Tinseltown was a letdown. A string of unsuccessful relationships, drug addiction, and a downward spiraling career hit Sylvia all at once.
It was a poor social life. It was the wrong social life. It was awful. The worst of it is that she would coke and lay in bed. So it was a kind of yin-yang thing. There she was, buzzed out of her head, but not moving.
It did bad things with my brain, I guess. When my business manager said, quit or sell the house.
She was under 100 pounds. She looked like she had just come out of Auschwitz. I knew that if I didn't get her back to Europe, she would die. She would absolutely die.
It was not a long period of time, but it was enough. I mean, if you start to have a bad reputation, it's very difficult to overcome that. So I was glad that I could disappear in my paintings. That was fun. Then finally I started to be a bit happy.
Hollywood almost managed to destroy Sylvia Christel. But for the Emmanuelle franchise, it was the perfect platform to launch a global brand. Hollywood had sent Sylvia Kristel into a tailspin. A string of unsuccessful relationships, drug addiction, and a downward spiraling career hit her all at once. Meanwhile, the legacy of Emmanuelle was soaring higher than ever. After the second sequel, Alan Siritsky stepped in and took control.
In our lives, there is very few important things. And love and sex, which by the way is two words but is the same thing, is very, very important. It's the reason why we are here. If we can have the rights to a character who symbolizes love and sex, we have to keep this character running.
After the success of the fourth film, Siritsky moved to Los Angeles and was on his way to shooting Emmanuelle straight into space.
Emmanuelle became very early on a myth, like Rambo became a myth, or Superman became a myth, or James Bond became a myth. Well, in my library I have 32 Emmanuelle pictures. I continue making them because I hope that one day I'll make a really good one.
Currently, Siritsky is on a worldwide search for the next Emmanuelle.
The character Emmanuelle, in fact, is more a spirit. Emmanuelle moves from one body to another because every woman at a certain moment in her life has to become Emmanuelle. She is a queen, she's a goddess of love and sex.
The first goddess of love and sex eventually wound up back in Amsterdam. Not only had she lost all of her money in failed ventures, the taxman was now after her.
So it's not for the friends that I moved to Holland, but it's easy to live here, you know. It's more comfortable for a poor person. In the sense that you don't have to dress up in the streets, you can just go in the tramway, you're not bothered.
This is Sylvia. To see this is to know that exquisite body. So you see, here is where she's safe to show a little exhibitionism, where she will draw her body, and to look at it is to know.
It's over 30 years since the first Emmanuelle came out. But Siritsky still has plans for the liberated woman.
So far, we've made a number of TV movies, but it's such a fabulous character. She has so many fans out there in the world that we really would like to bring the character to a theatrical picture again. I think she deserves it, and I think we will make it.
The latest 21st century Emmanuelle is Natasha Vermeer, also of Dutch origin. Alan Siritsky's photographer discovered her in Ibiza in a
cave. I know a lot of people go to Ibiza to party, but I was actually just there, you know, to really turn into myself and to go back to basics. And I was completely very zen, and there's like pure water coming out of the rocks there. I had my own vegetable garden. And then that one morning that I came actually out of the cave, I bumped into this photographer.
He said, "Alan, I have a new Emmanuelle for you."
Oh my God, I have to put you on film.
So we designed a collection of films that we called Emmanuelle's Private Collection.
And he promised me that he was going to make it very much like the first Emmanuelle. Also, Emmanuelle, it's not so different from my own personality. We have like that similar free spirit, and we're not being put down because we are sexually liberal. So I thought, like, you know, basically the only thing that I have to do is being myself. I'm like, I think I can do that. It's a little bit more explicit than, you know, they told me. 7 films back to back, and usually a lot of people have to go into acting school to get that much experience.
Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, Sylvia's troubles haven't ended. Her recent boyfriend died from cancer just after she found out she had cancer herself. For the last year, she has been recuperating.
I mean, we were at the hospital. Marianne picks up the phone, and I can see the tears coming into her eyes. I said, okay, is Freddie, is he dead? Yeah. And so he was gone, and all of a sudden you feel like you get to think of mortality. It's when you start to realize that you're getting older. When you.
But I'll tell you something great about Sylvia. The last years, she's lived with minimal money. She lives very simply. She certainly doesn't wear couture clothes anymore. And she's fine. She doesn't have any bitterness, or she doesn't go back and say, oh, those were the glory days, and look at me now. There's no self-pity.
Looking back, I think I was extremely lucky. I have had great opportunities. I saw the world. And now I feel like, well, I don't really need to go out there and yell, look at me, love me, etc. I've had all of that, you know, now I can relax. I'm still a bit in mourning, so I'm not quite open for other relationships. And also, at first, I have to recuperate, you know, that's the main goal.
A soldier destined for Vietnam wants to be human rather than just a killing machine. Tigerland on Film 4 Weekly tomorrow at 10. Now next here on Channel 4, youngsters explain why they are so keen to get married in Teens That Tie the Knot.